I'm Gleaves Whitney. This continues my video essay, Less Pluribus, More Unum. Chapter 2, Human Nature Must Navigate Difficult Existential Polarities. What is the remote cause of the hate many Americans feel toward one another? Simply put, it's the human condition. Every American citizen and every immigrant, by virtue of their humanity, has the capacity to dislike others. It's just the way it is. Ethologists who study the higher primates have discovered that bonobos are more likely to solve their conflicts peaceably than, say, chimpanzees. Chimps can be vicious to each other and to other species, whereas bonobos prefer to groom and play with monkeys. Chimps will hunt monkeys. Chimps also practice infanticide, lethal invasion, and cannibalism. Although we human beings share about 98-99% of our DNA with bonobos and chimpanzees, we are infinitely more complex. If we look into humankind's earliest history, read the ancient world's oldest literature, and explore the axial age's most sacred religious texts, we find that human beings have already been conscious of living amid polarities that are both difficult and existential. Difficult because without choosing to, we must operate between such polar opposites as love and hate, life and death, good and evil, freedom and necessity. Existential because these polarities are given. They are in the nature of things. As human beings, we only have the power to navigate between the poles, not abolish them. Between the polar opposites is a space we humans are given to inhabit. We know not why, but it is where we write the human story, sometimes as tragedy, sometimes as comedy, always with quandaries and moral dilemmas. Love and hate is a primary polarity that subsumes secondary polarities. One of them is connectedness and separateness. On the one hand, we know that all human beings are one. Genome sequencing proves it. No matter how striking our differences, the greatest and least among us share more in common than we do with the next closest species. When Aristotle studied what makes us human, he argued that the thing we share is the logos, the capacity to reason and communicate logically. When Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, he tapped into our intuitive understanding that all people are equal in their possession of natural rights. When H.G. Wells wrote The War of the Worlds, he relied on sentiments of solidarity to make the storyline work. Recent events show that feelings of connectedness have been reinforced by the coronavirus pandemic. It is necessary that we collectively hate this virus. Since COVID-19 is no respecter of nations, races, or ethnicities, no less a biological unit than Homo sapiens has been mustered to fight a world war to the finish. On the other hand, we know that human beings are tribal. We separate into the little platoons that give our lives meaning. I cherish my family, my friends, my church, my community. I treasure my civic associations and the land of my birth. I take pride in my ancestry and my team. I tear up when I sing the Star-Spangled Banner. These are all healthy attachments that define my social identity. But carried to the extreme, divorced from the pull of solidarity, such attitudes can sort us into exclusive tribes. We start viewing people in terms of whether they are members of the in-group or the out-group. We sacralize our identity, make it off limits, even when it impacts public policy. From such thinking, it is a small step to dislike or even hate the other. And surveys in the U.S. show that lots of Democrats and lots of Republicans have unfortunately taken that step. Another polarity subsumed by love and hate is group preservation and self-preservation. Because there are outside forces that can destroy us, we developed a social instinct to cooperate with our neighbors and improve our shared chances of survival. To survive a pandemic requires that we seek common ground for the common good. Group preservation occurs when we think less about ourselves and do more for our neighbors. Think of the farmers in a barn raising, or the Red Cross volunteers after a natural disaster. That is the way of progress. The opposite pole is self-preservation, also implanted by nature for our survival. Self-preservation can easily become disordered when we become more absorbed with ourselves than self-preservation requires, when we don't care about our neighbor, when we seek our private good at the expense of our neighbor and the common good. When we do these things, then we have turned the instinct of self-preservation into bald selfishness. The group suffers, and ultimately we do too. That is the way of regress. Since disordered selfishness is a constant temptation, we must learn to channel it as best we can into social purposes, to practice the golden rule, to do well by doing good, to love thy neighbor as thyself, as a famous rabbi once put it. Thinkers of the Scottish Enlightenment counseled people to pursue their own happiness by all means, but consonant with the happiness of mankind. Only enlightened self-interest, or self-interest properly understood, could reconcile the polar opposites of the selfish instinct and the social instinct so that we can find enough common ground to live together. There have been many parables to describe this existential war within us between love and hate. Christians and Jews describe how God's good creation was corrupted by sin. Natural law theorists see Locke emphasizing our social instincts and Hobbes our selfish instincts. Freudians put it in terms of the superego battling the ego. Star Wars aficionados see the leaders of the Galactic Republic warring against those of the evil empire. Whatever parable we live by, we Americans must somehow dial back the hatred and call on the better angels of our nature. That concludes Chapter 2 of my video essay, Less Pluribus, More Unum. I invite you to watch Chapter 3. Thanks for dropping in.